thing was, is that the prosecution didn't call these witnesses to the trial. In fact, I think it showed that the prosecution were so uncertain about their other evidence that they didn't want these railway guards called in case, so to speak, they would get in the witness box and say, no, that's not the man.
The only way out for Walters is to convince a mental health review tribunal that he is sane, cured of his delusions. Yet his belief in his innocence is in itself regarded as a delusion. The paradox is that in order to be released as an innocent man, he must confess he is a guilty man. And all the while, Walters has set up what must be a new record. He has now served 8 years of a 4-year sentence. 2 mental health review tribunals have already turned him down. And Walters himself realizes that if he continues to protest his innocence, he may be condemned to a life sentence inside Broadmoor for a crime he almost certainly did not commit.
You may like to know that Martin Young has written an article linked to that programme which will appear in tomorrow's edition of The Listener magazine.
A major new thriller serial starts on BBC1 tomorrow, Bird of Prey. A civil servant attempts to thwart a huge computer-based conspiracy, but is menaced by the power.
What is the power?
The power, Henry, is what protects our politicians and masters and rulers and betters when they find they have to do business with crooks.
And Louis knew something about a politician, and he was using the threat of blackmail to get him off the Ital Bank charges.
Forget me, forget your report, put in your 9-to-5s and don't rock the boat. That's your best bet. See you, Henry.
A lonely and dangerous road for Richard Griffiths, who stars in Bird of Prey tomorrow at 9:25.
Thrills of a different kind now, as for the next 50 minutes or so, BBC1 devotes itself to sport.
Good evening. Great news for Aston Villa tonight. They're through to the final of the European Cup, but Tottenham Hotspur go out of the Cup Winners' Cup. We'll have more about that in just a moment. Tonight we hear from a top FIFA official about the options that body must face over the World Cup as the Falkland Islands crisis continues. And as Formula One motor racing again falls into disarray, we talk to the man who leads the revolt. There's a strong American flavour to our action tonight. British boxers faced 2 American opponents last night. For flyweight Charlie Magri, it was all action. And he's looking as though he's going to stop this man rather quickly, and over goes Cisneros for the first time. At the other end of the weight scale, an American heavyweight provided pure farce. And that's not all our fighting tonight. In ice hockey, the United States have been playing their arch rivals, the Soviet Union, in an explosive World Championship match in Finland.
Kleinendorf has dropped his glove, and so has Bilyanetinov. This is a very unusual situation for the Russians. They very seldom ever get involved in any fisticuffs.
Could do with a bit more of that later. First, tonight's football news from Tony Gubber.
So Aston Villa are through to the European Cup final at their very first attempt. A goalless draw in tonight's semi-final second leg against Anderlecht, putting the English champions through 1-0 on aggregate. But Villa's celebrations are soured by the prospect of a punishment from FIFA over the behaviour of their fans. Reporting from Brussels, Brian Butler.
A fine, taut, marvellously disciplined performance by Villa's players. They held Anderlecht in the palm of their hands. They didn't score, but then they didn't need to. Anderlecht, a side given to defence and safety, and unable to change their tactics when they needed to. That's the good news. The bad news is that once again there was serious crowd trouble before the game and then midway through the first half, with play itself held up for 6 minutes. The trouble caused not by Villa fans who got their tickets from the club and were properly segregated, but by fans who travelled on their own, bought tickets from Anderlecht and found themselves shoulder to shoulder with Belgian fans. The possible consequences? A heavy fine, perhaps for both clubs, and a ban on all Villa fans for the final itself. There's even talk that UEFA might prevent Villa from taking part in the final itself, but that, I think, is not likely.
So the crucial Villa goal was scored by Tony Morley in the first leg, and their opponents in the final in Rotterdam on May the 26th will be the West German team Bayern Munich, 3 times winners of the European Cup, who tonight beat CSKA Sofia 4-0 to win 7-4 on aggregate. And there was tension and tough tackling too in Barcelona tonight as Tottenham struggled unsuccessfully to reach the final of the Cup Winners' Cup. Despite the advantage of numerous free kicks tonight, Spurs were unable to score and were beaten 1-0. Alan Simonsen was the man who scored the crucial goal for Barcelona. Incidentally, goalkeeper Ray Clements was booked during the game tonight, and of course it was his mistake in the first leg a fortnight ago, which now has proved crucial, with Spurs beaten 2-1 on aggregate. And Barcelona's opponents in the final will be Standard Liège, 1-0 winners over Dynamo Tbilisi, 2-0 winners on aggregate.